I'm talking to Gus Khouri. He's one of the nominees for the Newmarket-Aurora Liberal Riding Association, and that candidate selection meeting is taking place on December 16th. Now, let's talk about the youth in Canada. What needs to be done, do you think, to engage the youth in the political process?
Okay, well, actually, there's the Statistics Canada article that I often reference. It came out about 6 months ago, and it basically identified the Canadian youth demographic between 18 and 29 years old as the most educated, the most socially aware, the most politically aware demographic when compared to any other equivalent age group in any other industrialized nation. So here we are in Canada. We've done a wonderful job of basically of educating this group, of making them aware of all these different issues. Okay, but the same article also said that less than 50% of them show up and vote in provincial and federal elections. Okay,
why?
So there's this massive disconnect between between social change and how to go about the social issues that they believe in, how to go about creating social change. So they basically they're aware of these subjects, they just don't go and vote. And the reason being is not because of apathy, it's not because they're unaware. They know these issues, they just don't identify the Canadian democratic process as a means to a positive end when trying to do something positive in their society. So basically what happens is you have all this very educated group of people who because we were talking about Facebook earlier, there's all these different issues with Facebook, and they join groups to show support for these various causes, but they don't know how to go about doing it in society, and I think that's a tremendous problem. We have to correct that issue, and I think I, more than any other candidate, can I speak their language, and I will bring them forth. I'll bring the youth to the voting booth. I'll bring them forward. I'll get them there and engage them. And the youth, they're an educated bunch. Stephen Harper says things like the perceived effects of global warming and things like that. We respond to that. We pick out those little nuances that he does not take the global warming issue seriously. That that he doesn't plan on doing anything worthwhile about it. And we will vote accordingly. But that's basically. Ultimately, we had the Remembrance Day recently. Right, November 11th. We have all of these ceremonies, and that's great. But the best way to remember those people who fought and died for what they fought and died for was by going out and casting your ballot. Ultimately fought for our democracy.
Good, very good point.
Right, and here we are with our future leadership, demographic, the youth, not voting. So my goal is to basically bring those people forth and get them to the polls.
I have to tell you, I read an article that said it was not the responsibility of the voter to be engaged, it was the responsibility of the politician to engage the voter. And I think that's really true, and I think people do need to go out, politicians do need to go out and bring in the voters.
Yeah, well, fortunately, actually, unfortunately, it's not required that people go and vote. So you're absolutely right. It's the job of the politicians. But there are politicians who sort of thrive in that environment. There's a lot of sort of the established sort of a ruling class does not want to be bothered by what the population thinks. They're not interested in what the average person has to say about what they're doing. So as far as they're concerned, you get people like Stephen Harper, he's very authoritarian. He doesn't like intervention. He doesn't like for people to tell him basically what their opinion is. And that's not the type of government we need to see. We need people to sort of push our democracy. A perfect example was when Stephen Harper knows that he doesn't have such a strong support in Ontario as the Liberal Party does, and right after the Ontario provincial election, this year has been a record year for elections across Canada, and that was exactly it. And they were pushing so hard for an election, the Conservatives. They just wanted it because they knew that people were apathetic and they were just tired of voting, and that works in their favor. If people aren't paying attention, if people aren't looking, and if people just don't feel like getting to the polls to vote, then they can keep going along with what they want to do and pushing their own agenda, regardless of what the average Canadian thinks. So that's basically it.
Do you think, you've talked about elections, do you think that we will see a federal election soon? Do you think that Stéphane Dion and the Liberals are ready?
Absolutely, absolutely. To reference that same the convention I went to in Huntsville, I heard Stéphane Dion speak. And I've seen a lot of politicians, as I mentioned. I've seen a lot of politicians speak, and sometimes there are highlights in the speech, and there's I kind of agree with that, and so on. In all honesty, because it was a Liberal convention, and we were sort of up and really cheering him on. But there were times during that speech he spoke for about 15 minutes, and I remember I was at a table with a large group of young Liberals, and we sort of looked at each other like, this guy's really saying something you know, that he really sort of, I think he had the whole room on its feet. We really believed in what he was saying, and he was saying things. I mean, he said things I didn't know politicians could even say. He was just speaking, you know, so clearly and to the point, and he was kind of, you know, letting us know what our job ahead of us was, and absolutely, I think they're really ready. You know, just the fact that our nomination meeting is coming up. I think there's a lot of ridings across Canada that didn't have representation. That, you know, you'll see that happening in the next couple of weeks. There's a lot of associations that are having their meetings. So yeah, absolutely, I think they're good to go.